Yeah, thanks so much. Hey, everybody, welcome. I know people are probably coming over from different locations, so as you're joining, please feel free to post questions in the chat, and we'll get to them throughout the presentation, actually in a different way. So just a brief introduction. My name is Chris. I also have on the line Dustin from the Air Force, and the purpose of this breakout session is to do basically a real-time collider. So if you think about what we would have been doing in person in Austin, we would be sitting in a room with an Air Force problem owner, Dustin in this case, and then a bunch of brand new potential 20.1 companies who are applicable to this particular problem space, which is augmented reality to help locate utility lines. And Dustin will go into a little bit more detail about that. But bear with us as we try to do this in a virtual session. And so briefly, just wanted to start with why are we here? And what are we going to try to accomplish in this 45 minutes? We want to rapidly match a vetted problem with potential solution providers. So Dustin, as our problem owner, has gone through a process to understand this problem and vet it. And Dustin, I'll toss it over to you in a sec to sort of talk through that problem and why that's important. And then if there are companies on the line, ideally folks saw the name of this, and if you're a new 20.1 company and thought to yourself, this could be something that's applicable to my technology solution, and I want to engage with this Air Force problem owner, that's the type of people we want in this room right now. And so bear with us as we make this virtual. The schedule we're gonna try to adhere to is a brief problem introduction. So that'll be Dustin and his folks. And then we'll go into a little bit of an Ask the Expert session. So if you are a company or if an airman or whoever else is in here and you have questions after Dustin has introduced the problem and how they got here, I'd ask you to please put that in and we'll sort of answer that in real time if that works. And then from there, I'd ask if you're a company and you believe that you have a solution or technology that can apply to this, is identify yourself in the chat. We'll try and unmute you in real time. I'm not sure how easy that's going to go, or if the Capital Factory team will work with me on that or be able to work with us on that. But if not, please just let us know and identify in the chat bot. And then ideally, what we'd like to be able to have is Dustin and his team to then ask questions of companies in real time. And then we'll, at the very end, I think probably the most important piece of this is contact information. So what happens after this 45 minutes? You know, we don't want this to be a 45-minute session that doesn't go anywhere. So Dustin, I'll ask you at the very end, let the companies that are on this line that might have applicable solutions and products know how best to interact with your team and how to contact you all for further discussion. And again, that'll just make sure that this isn't a 45-minute thing that just happens and everybody goes their separate way, but there's actually real action taking place on the back end of this. And so I'll pause now and turn it over to you, Dustin, and ask, maybe before you launch into the actual problem, can you talk a little bit about the process that you go through as an organization to identify problems and then vet those problems? And I think you guys went through a pretty vigorous process and included your airmen pitching in front of general officers and leadership. And I think that's important because it shows that to the companies here that this is a problem that has leadership backing, has leadership insight into this existing, and a sort of a thumbs up, if you will, on something that they're willing to put resources behind potentially and work with companies. And so you find as you go through in this ecosystem, sometimes there are problems that are just sort of good ideas and maybe one person has them and they haven't talked to stakeholders or vetted it or moved through the process. And those can be really valuable too, right? But in terms of the ability to move rapidly, I think Dustin and his team have done a lot of upfront work to make sure that this is a problem that's validated and vetted, and they're ready to identify solution providers and move forward really rapidly and put resources behind it if things go well. So I'll turn it over to you, Dustin, maybe talk a little bit about the process. I'll pull up the slides, and then once you're ready to roll, I'll advance the slides as you tell me to. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it, Chris. So before we get started, I kind of wanted to introduce myself, Dustin Dickens. I work for the Installation and Mission Support Center. And we also have our counterpart here, Miss Emily Miller. And so we work a part of a team that works to take Air Force airmen ideas and bring them up through the bases and installations through to IMSC, which is a an Air Force intermediate level headquarters. And so for the past year, 2 years, we've put on a innovation rodeo. And so what that rodeo does is it uses ideas that are mission support center generated, ideas that can help installations move forward and solve specific installation problem sets. And they go through a process. They come TDY here to San Antonio. They pitch their ideas to senior leaders, and then a specific number of these ideas are moved forward. For the 2020 Innovation Rodeo, we had 3 winners, Kinderspot, which was a CDC subleasing app, augmented reality for utility locates, which is what we're talking about today, and also autonomous airfield mowing. We also had 2 follow-ons that were supported as well, and one was real property inventory management. It's automated, robotic automated processing, and then also radio frequency identification tracking. And so through the rodeo, these particular ideas are sponsored by Air Force senior leaders to move forward. And so our goal is to typically match them with SBIR companies to funnel through the process to see if it's a viable solution for the Air Force. And once we have that viable solution, the actual ultimate goal, once that MVP is determined, a feasibility study is garnered, it is then possibly rolled out through Air Force channels. So I don't know, Emily, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think one of the really cool things we get to do is before we pick those, we pick top 8 teams to come out to San Antonio and participate in the Innovation Rodeo. Before we make that top 8 decision, we reach out to the program offices that would potentially take on these projects and see if they are a go for it and make it happen, or if there's something else in the works, because we don't have the in-depth knowledge of what's going on in all those centers, but we have the connections to do that. So we want to make sure that the ideas that we're sponsoring and putting through this Innovation Rodeo process have the backup support to make it happen. During that week when we do the Innovation Rodeo, we work with a pitch consulting team that was awesome, and is currently a phase 1 company through the SBIR process that really help these airmen know how to pitch their problems and ask for what they needed and what they wanted to make these happen. So we're really excited to find solutions to these problems, especially this ARAF, as we call it, and see what we can do to work through the SBIR realm and move these ideas forward and find these scalable solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Another thing I did want to mention, so as the center, the Installation and Mission Support Center, our goal is to think about enterprise-wide solutions. And so a lot of the spark cells and the different levels of the Air Force bring together these particular ideas, and they focus on base and installation specific problems. And our goal is to try to take some of those and apply them across the Air Force enterprise for mission support. So kind of give you guys an idea of how we operate and how we want to move forward. Any questions on that specific? If you want to chat them or ask them before we move into the presentation. Anything to add?
Hey, Dustin, this is Chris again. I just made a couple notes on some things I thought you mentioned, which were really important and just show the level of sophistication you all are operating at. One, I think what's important that I mentioned earlier is you talked through the rigorous vetting process that you go through, which I think at this point gives a lot of confidence in terms of your understanding of this particular problem and the value that it could provide Air Force wide, not just at individual bases. The second thing that I picked up that I thought was really interesting is you do reach out to the program executive offices and other organizations to see if this is something that has legs for transition and scaling. And I think that's critically important. You heard several of the talks earlier today talk a little bit about that valley of death and how to cross that. And I think that specific step that you're taking is incredibly important to that. So kudos to you guys for doing that. And then the third one that I thought was really interesting was because of where you sit as an organization, you're able to take an enterprise-wide view of problems that are sourced organically and in a decentralized way. So you're having problems filtered up from bases across the Air Force, and where you sit, you're able to take a very enterprise-wide view of those problems and understand which ones may be base specific potentially and which ones have the potential to make an impact on the entire enterprise. And so just wanted to call out those 3 points and just say kudos to you and the organization for doing those things. And I'll go ahead and share the slides for you guys again.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, when he's pulling up the slides, I'll just briefly kind of talk about augmented reality for utility locate. So we had a phenomenal airman by the name of Senior Airman Strausser come in and present this particular idea. And so what it is we have communications squadrons and civilian engineering squadrons. Think of Department of Public Works. And they locate utilities on a constant and regular basis. And so they just need a method to do that more rapidly. They're wasting a lot of man hours going through and trying to locate the utilities by pinging the line and spray painting and finding that particular line. The goal here is to take geospatial information system data that the Air Force currently holds and then overlay that data into some type of augmented reality device or user display. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. And so since you got the slides up, you can just continue to the next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. So as previously stated, they send a tone, both CE and COM, they send a tone down a utility path, and the path is marked accordingly. Next slide. And so it's like we said, they're trying to limit the amount of man hours it takes to do a specific task. And if you click to the next slide, it'll kind of bring up the problem defined. It takes quite a few hours to do that. And so the goal here is to use exactly what I said earlier, geospatial information system data to overlay utility locations. And so what this will allow the end users to do, both COM, the communication squadrons for line locates, and also utility locates for CE, it'll allow them to accurately identify those particular records using geospatial information systems. They can do it for repairs. Whenever somebody comes in and we get requests for geospatial information, it could be sent to those particular users for requests. And so that's really the goal, is to transfer that data to a device. Next slide. So again, this talks about the particular solution, 35 to 50% faster, 1,180 hours saved annually, 80% up to 80% less time required for validation. So the real kicker here is how many man hours this goal and effort, this idea, this innovation would save. It would save tremendous amount of man hours across the Air Force. You know, each individual installation has communications and CE squadrons that use this system and set of systems. And so the goal is to reduce the man hours associated to save the Air Force, you know, millions of dollars across the enterprise. Next slide. Again, there's been commercial success, and we'll kind of go through this. There's been, so this was the pitch deck that they pitched to get senior leader buy-in. So we don't have to go through all these steps, but you can kind of see the problem set is we want to be able to accurately capture the GIS data, have an overlay through augmented reality or a similar device. We want to be able to directly feed into the system, possibly have for official use only information in either in the storage location where the data is pulled from, or have a separate location that just uses the data and pulls it forward. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this is the current support. Next slide. We can go through the specific asks. You can just click through these. We can go to the very end. So really, some of the particular efforts that they're trying to accomplish with this, especially when it was briefed, is they want to be able to reduce the amount of man hours associated with line and utility locates, and accurately provide information, so it's easier to find those utilities and do particular tasks. I know when we talk to the subject matter experts, one of the key particular items with this was they want to be able to integrate into existing processes. So they don't want to add a cumbersome process on top of the way they currently operate. They want to try to implement these into the standard operating procedure so that they could easily go out and do the line and utility locates. Also, it doesn't really matter what method it is. We say augmented reality, but really what we would like to do is take that geospatial data and overlay it into a visual platform that is easier to locate than particular line pings and spray paint. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. We have some questions on the Q&A, and I'm just wondering,
it looks like we have a question. How are you measuring the effectiveness of the geodata as well as the machine learning usage?
So the geospatial data is certified through ArcGIS and some other systems, GeoBase, and so that's certified to DoD each year. And so the goal is to use that particular data as a initial sample to see if it's accurate. So again, this is all, the goal of all of this is to make sure that we get an MVP, and both the geospatial information and also whatever type of display unit that would be displayed on, that it is accurate. And so that would be a part of the deliverables on a executable contract. And so, you know, that's a good question. And so the goal is to do both underground utility and eventually other types of utility lines. But the original first goal is underground utility.
We have a guest that's asking, are these ground utility lines or air power lines?
So initially, for an MVP, it'd be ground utility. I see another one that came in. What are the main activities after a locate occurs? Are you installing communications, utility, excavating, compiling information? So yes, after utility locate occurs, it's all of the above. It could be excavation, it could be utility repair, replacement. It's data pools to show where specific utilities are located. So there's a lot involved. It's not just for a particular to display the data. It's actually that data would then be used for all communication squadrons and utility squadrons to do repairs, updates, replacements, different things like that. Hopefully that answered that. Another question, what rodeo selection? Would rodeo selection find a fluency score like a FICO score for startups useful in that it provides selection teams with deep insight into the market fit for commercial viability? So commercial viability is absolutely discussed. This particular effort, you know, it does have a high commercial viability. I mean, utility locates using geospatial information. It's also in some cases commercially available now. There are some industries and cities that use geospatial information and augmented reality for their utility locates. It's just not common in every market. There are a few commercial solutions on the market. Yep, that's true. There are some commercial solutions.
And then we have another question coming through the chat. Does this application require an ATO? If not, how are you bypassing that requirement?
So that's a good question. So it really depends on the method that's used. So if the data resides on a network, it would need an ATO. but it depends on how it's processed and used. And that would be a part of the discussion phase we would have to have with a particular vendor on how the data would be processed, on whether or not it would need an authority to operate. There are methods to work with that. GSA has established a FedRAMP, which is a fast method to get small businesses authorized and an ATO. And so we would pursue multiple means to get an authority to operate. And so I think the goal would be to work with vendors and also internally with the Air Force to determine the best method to move forward. And so we're open to all solutions with authorities to operate and then data storage. So really that's kind of a discovery phase. We would need to figure out how that would best fit the Air Force's needs. All right, I see the chat. The question was for Dustin and Emily. We'd love to chat with you offline. Yep, no problem.
All right, Dustin, it looks like there was one other about a company sort of in a tangential space. Traxel does not locate data, but developed a new way to install comm lines by bonding low-profile fiber cables to the road service, thus avoiding the need to locate. Does this align with your efforts? I think sounds like it's a different way of attacking the problem, which is also important to consider. So I think your contact information we'll share at the end as well. So free to follow up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And any alternate solutions you know, as vendors you think are viable, we're not stuck into one particular solution. So we're open to any solution that would solve the issue to help the communication and civil engineering squadrons be able to more accurately locate utilities in a faster manner and save man hours. So we're open to all available options. So if there's something that doesn't, you know, specifically fit the augmented reality for utility locates, but there's another idea that's applicable, please reach out. We would love to hear that, get the SMEs together and have future and further discussions.
And Dustin, I know we're limited in this virtual environment to really have sort of a rich back and forth conversation with these folks. So I'd say now is probably a good time to maybe just share the best way to contact with you and follow up for the folks that have been engaging and who may have a potential solution to talk further about. So can you share the best way to do that for your organization and you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to post our contact emails in the chat, as well as link to our rodeo and some other things in the chat box. So if you guys give us a minute, we'll post those in there once this is done. So before we, so is there any other questions? Are there specific, you know, I know, Chris, are we adhering to kind of what you wanted to accomplish as a Q&A and a back and forth? Is there anything else you'd like to kind of move forward with?
Yeah, I think in terms of what we're able to do virtually, this is probably about it. You know, ideally, if we were in person, it'd be great to have the companies maybe talk a little bit about their particular solutions, but that's difficult to do without audio. And so I think, you know, maybe we could just stay online. We've got the room for a little while, so maybe we can stay online for a few more minutes, field additional questions while you're posting your contact information.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna go down. Whenever we talk to some of the subject matter experts in the comm squadron and also in CE, they kind of gave us a list of things that they wanted to touch on. So the goal was to actually have them here to speak to some of this, but since we don't, I'm just gonna go through some of these so you guys can get an idea of some of the impacts and the top, you know, big rocks that they see with augmented reality utility locates, or just utility locates using different and succinct methods. So some of the things that were mentioned, they don't want it to impede vision or create unsafe and distracting visuals, so that they can maintain situational awareness. If we do decide to store the data, it's for official use only. Unclassified must be stored to these particular standards as well. They want to integrate with current workflows and processes so that you know, it's not a big ask or a big change in the way that things are being accomplished. They can just kind of integrate it into their existing processes to do line locates for whatever reason, whether that's repairs, replacement, just general information. Um, Again, like I stated in multiple other at the beginning of this call, platform agnostic. It really doesn't matter the platform as long as we're able to accurately and correctly identify utility locates and lines. And then flexible cost. I think we'd be absolutely open to licensing and different things like that. So I think that would come as we had further discussions with the subject matter experts and the installations. And so those are just some of the key points that were mentioned whenever we asked the subject matter experts for, the big rocks, big things that would prevent this from taking place, or nice to haves whenever they move forward.
Yeah, it looks like they came through, Dustin. Thank you.
Okay, and we're also going to post, so we do have a video from the Innovation Rodeo where it is the actual presentation that was pitched, and it's also the slide deck that we just put up. It's a YouTube video. We'll post that in the chat as well, so you guys can kind of see how this progressed, see the Innovation Rodeo, finalized product, and also see the slide deck on how the presentation was pitched here at IMSC. So hopefully that'll give you a better idea. But if you have specific questions, please reach out. We'd love to talk to everybody on the line, all the vendors and contractors that have solutions to this particular problem. We'll make sure to set up meetings and get everyone on board in discussions with a subject matter expert, so that we can have a fruitful discussion on possible paths forward. But I appreciate everybody's time, and we'll hang out here just in case any additional questions come in. But again, like I stated, we'll post the video down in the chat bar.
Hey, thanks so much for your time, Dustin and team over there.
No, thanks for hosting this, Chris. I really appreciate the facilitation, and also Capital Factory. You guys are awesome being able to pull this off in a few days. So thank you very much for your support and assistance as well.